Okay, so hi everybody, and welcome to the live and interactive session with Zapier. We have Jessie Parker from Zapier to do a demo on the product for us and hopefully demystify some of the stuff around it. And we have Heather Satterly, our resident expert on Zapier, who is just killing it and making it something really meaningful for us in the accounting world. So it's not just some sort of fun toy to tie a bunch of stuff together. Heather is using it not just for herself and her own firm, but I've been in her course, which you should take, and seen it in action for how she is using it for her clients as well, which I have to say was an aha moment. I never really thought of Zapier as a value-added service for my clients, but Heather definitely opened my eyes to that when I took her course. And so, Jessie, thank you for being here. I really, really super appreciate you doing a group demo for the workflow watering hole. And
My pleasure.
yeah, and with that, I know that, so I'm a bit of a winging it gal. I'm just going to see where this whole session goes. But Jessie actually has around a 20-minute session scheduled for now on Zapier, the product itself. So I'm just gonna let you go. Now, if anybody notices that the screen sharing isn't working out, if you could let me know right away rather than part way into it. And then we're good to go.
Fantastic.
Okay.
All right, yeah. Let's dive in then and talk about automating your business. And something that I wanted to say before we kind of jump in is that if you use Zapier currently or you don't use Zapier at all, you will get something out of this presentation, because I'm not just going to be talking about the role that Zapier plays in helping scale your business, but I'm also going to talk about the importance of embracing a systems mindset and how these two things go hand in hand. So as Kelly mentioned, my name's Jessie Parker. I was actually one of the first employees to work at Zapier. I was employee number 8, and I've worked there for over 5 years now, so we're well over 200 people. And I've had the opportunity to work in many different parts of the organization, but currently I'm leading the experts program, and that's where I'm working with consultants and agencies, and I'm really helping to educate them and collaborate with them on different ways that we can implement automation in the businesses of their clients. And my role actually right now is evolving a little bit more into community. So really trying to focus on connecting with groups like this and helping to educate people on Zapier and help folks that are looking for other ways to work smarter and scale their business faster. And Kelly also mentioned that we have Heather Satterly on the call, who is a top 100 pro advisor for QuickBooks, has a bunch of other awesome accreditations, and I'm proud to say that she's actually one of our certified Zapier experts. So she's been through an insane amount of testing and all of that to earn her spot here. So the first thing I actually wanted to talk about here is the importance of systems in the context of your business. And systems are important because they're going to directly impact the outcomes that you're able to produce. So it's really important that before we dive into all of the Zapier stuff, that we get into the mindset of how systems work. And I borrowed this graphic here from Arts Forward because I think it illustrates an important point about how an input directly impacts an output, even though we might not think about that outcome initially. Because if things are unstable in the beginning, you can bet that they're going to come all the way back around and be unstable in the end as well. So systems, how do they work? Let's talk about some of the components that make up the basic steps here of a system. So the first thing we have here on your left are inputs. So this is the information that you're feeding into a system. And for many of you, working in the accounting industry, a common input that you might have might be a new client. So from there, we have processes. So you might be wondering, hey, what's actually happening with this new client? So an example might be that you're taking the client information and you're using that to execute an onboarding process. And then we have outputs here to the right, and those are just simply the result of applying the processes that we have to our inputs. So in the example I've been using, if you had a new client and then you applied an onboarding process, the output or the result is that the client is now onboarded and they're hopefully set up for success, right? So those are the three basic components there, but the system isn't over when the output happens. So we really need to take a look at the results that our systems are producing and make iterations for next time. So was there something that we could have been doing to speed up the onboarding process? Is there something that we could be doing to make our client even more, successful in working with us? So we always want to keep collecting this feedback about how well our systems are working and make changes where needed. And then the last part of a system is one of the most important parts, in my opinion, and that's your environment. So that's represented by the little sun there in the corner. And your environment affects how your entire system works. So if you're somebody who's really disorganized and your data is living in 7 different Google Sheets and you have sticky notes all over your desk, then that's going to directly impact and affect the results that you're able to achieve through your systems. So when your information environment in particular is really organized and it's accurate and everything's consistent, that's called data integrity. And that's a really important prerequisite to automation that I think a lot of people miss when they're first starting out with automation or Zapier in general. So to make this a little bit easier
I'm going to chime in for a minute there, Jesse. That is such a good point. I didn't sort of see that coming as something that we were going to get out of this, but thank you. That's a really good point. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, definitely something to consider before automation. And again, that's where a lot of people, that really kind of separates the people who are successful and not successful in Zapier. So I want to make sure that even the folks that are using Zapier that have come to this presentation understand that, hey, I could be doing this outside of Zapier to get more within Zapier. So to kind of carry over what I was saying about the systems components, to make things a bit easier to understand, I wanted to talk about systems in a context that I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with, which are Legos. And Legos teach us really important lessons about systems thinking. So I want you all to imagine for a moment that your business is made up of a bunch of different Lego pieces, and they're all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. And when they're assembled correctly, you get a really cool final product. But getting to the final product efficiently and effectively depends on a few things. So the first thing you need to do is you need to organize and segment your pieces so you know where everything is. And then, of course, you need a clear set of instructions that lets you know how all these different pieces fit together. And then you need somebody to assemble the pieces. And most of you said you're entrepreneurs. So in this case, it's probably you who's responsible for putting all these pieces together. So let's run through how we can apply some of these steps that I just mentioned and systems thinking into the context of your business and where Zapier plays a role in all of this. All right, so organizing and segmenting data. So when I'm referring to this, I'm really talking about your environment. So that little sun from the first diagram there. And I like to use Airtable here as an example of how to do this well, because they essentially took the idea of a spreadsheet, but instead of letting things be a total free-for-all, they designed their product as a framework for data integrity. So that just means that they made it really easy for people to organize their data and understand the relationships that exist between them, so they can therefore use that data in more meaningful ways. And as I was saying before, a lot of times we have people who try out Zapier who are working in a super disorganized environment and they have very unclear processes. And so Zapier ends up being used as more of a Band-Aid and less of a catalyst. And that's not something that we want. That's not how you're going to get the most out of your time with Zapier. So these people who are using Zapier as a Band-Aid are going to be saving some time, right? There's still some time saved in automation. But without first developing a solid foundation, the system as a whole doesn't really run very efficiently. And to use an analogy here, It's kind of like if you bought brand new tires and you put them on a really old car with like 300,000 miles. So you're going to grip the road really, really well if the car makes it out of the driveway. And perhaps it was the engine that you needed to address and rebuild before those tires become really useful. So all of this really is to say that, making sure that your data is organized and segmented in the apps and the databases and the CRMs, whatever it is you're using, that's going to make sure that your inputs get filtered and categorized in the right places. And that also allows your processes to be as effective as they can be. All right, so moving on to process management. And I promise we're getting into the Zapier stuff soon. So you can think of process management as your business's instructional manual. And, a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we don't really have these processes documented, right? A lot of these things live in our heads because we do them all the time. And it's like, why am I going to write this down? But if you ever find yourself in a situation where you want to clone yourself or you want to hire assistants without having to spend a whole bunch of time getting them up to speed, this is going to be where proper process management comes into play. So if you're keeping things in your head, I'm going to say stop right now, because that is most definitely holding you back from scaling your business. And I know that some of you may have done this before, and some of you might have not written out your processes. But if you feel overwhelmed by it, it's not that overwhelming. You can start by just writing a list of ordered steps in a very basic form, or you can start sketching out a flow chart, using a pen and paper, between TV shows or whenever you have free time. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that you actually make the effort to start documenting all of these little mini systems that, when combined, allow your business to function. And once you start to lay these processes out in front of you, you start to see the gaps as well as the opportunities to make things better. Okay, so let's say that you did make a flowchart. And if you take that flowchart and you lay it on its side, it becomes a little bit easier to understand some of the responsibilities and the dependencies between the actions and the steps within your process. And when you lay it out like this, you can really start picking things apart and finding opportunities for automation. So what you're looking at right here is an example of a process that I drew out that might be similar to something that you have set up in your own business, just from some of the things that I heard in the Facebook group when I was asking you all about some of the apps that you use. So maybe when you're signing a new client, you're adding them to 17 hats, like that's the trigger for your process. And then once that happens, a whole bunch of other things need to happen. So you need to enter that client into QuickBooks. Maybe you set up a client folder for them in Google Drive. Then you're emailing the client to set up an appointment, and you're trying to find a time, and then you decide on a time, and then you enter it into Google Calendar. And now that they're scheduled for an onboarding call, you're sending them to MailChimp so they can get some more information. And then your process ends when you have a setup call with the client. And I also want you to notice that when I laid this process out, I made sure to note the apps that I'm using, so I can see if they're supported on Zapier, and also understand the triggers and actions in Zapier that are available for each, because those are going to directly impact what I can and cannot automate in my process. So the goal here is really to think, how can I use Zapier to take more work off of my plate and streamline my processes? Because when you automate manual tasks, you have the time back in your day to focus on growing your business and taking on more clients and increasing the quality of service that you're able to deliver to those clients, right? Therefore, increasing your revenue, hopefully. That's the goal here. That's why we're all in business, right? We want to make more money. We want to help people. So if you head to Zapier, if you've ever been there before, there's this little section at the top called Apps. And that's where you can see all of the different apps that we support. And to make things easier, we have a search bar as well. So you can just, if you don't see something listed immediately, you can search and see if it's supported. But if you just look at what is listed here, we actually don't have to search very far to see some of the apps that we're already using in our workflow. And we even see another one there at the bottom, Calendly, which we didn't map out in our initial process flow, but it's something that we might want to consider exploring to maybe eliminate 1 or 2 steps from the process. Now, we don't see 17 hats or QuickBooks initially, so we can go ahead and search for those, and then we find 17 hats. So after we click on that, we'll scroll down to the integration details section. And this section is important because it lets us know if there are any pieces of our workflow that we can replace. So there's a trigger called new contact, and that's exactly what we need because it was adding a new contact to 17 hats that triggered the rest of our process. And without this happening, none of the other actions in the process can occur or be automated. So we can start diving into actually setting up a Zap. And for the sake of time, we'll kind of move forward here and we'll assume that Zapier supports QuickBooks and all the other triggers and actions that we need, which it does. So now we need to start setting up a Zap. And if you're not familiar with Zapier terminology, a Zap is just simply the automated version of the process that you've already mapped out. So it's made up of one trigger, which we talked about was you adding a client to 17 hats in this particular use case. And it's also made up of one or more actions. So what I want to do right now is actually head into my Zapier account and build a Zap as I'm talking with all of you so you can kind of see things firsthand. So
now I'm curious, Jesse, do you have the top level account? Do you use Zapier enough to have the top level account?
Well, yeah, because I work here, I definitely get the top level account.
Okay, but, I'm done interrupting. Carry on.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah, so some of the things you're going to see here, like the Zap that I'm about to build, because it has multiple actions, it's called a multi-step Zap. And that means that you will have to be on a paid plan to use it. You'll just need our lowest paid plan. So it's, we're not asking you to upgrade to some crazy pricing. And if you didn't want to upgrade to a paid plan, if you're just kind of new, you're starting out, you're unsure, you can still create the same workflow that I'm about to create, but instead of one Zap, you would just have multiple Zaps with 17 hats as the trigger, and each Zap would have a different action because on the free plan, you can only have one action per Zap. So let's dive in and make a Zap. Great, so I've already connected some of my accounts, but I'm going to walk through it anyway because I think it's useful for everybody to understand and see just how easy it is to start hooking your apps up to Zapier. But once you connect your apps, we actually know and we'll display it here for you so you can easily access it when you're building your Zap and you don't have to scroll and try to find everything or search. So as we talked about before, 17 hats was our trigger. And specifically, it was a new contact in there. So we'll select that and we'll save and continue. And like I said, I've already connected my 17 hats account, but if you wanted to connect your account, you'd click this button here. And then Zapier would ask you for one of 3 things. So there are 3 different ways that you can connect an app to Zapier, and the way in which you connect it is actually up to that app itself. So 17 hats here and many other apps that we have, they allow a connection through an API key. So somewhere in the settings of your account is this long string of numbers and sometimes letters that you'll need to find and paste in here, and then everything is connected. Other ways you can connect some accounts are just by entering your username and password, which you'll see in a later step. I believe MailChimp has that kind of authentication. And then you have apps like QuickBooks, where if you're signed into QuickBooks in another tab, when this little window pops up here, it's actually just going to say, hey, do you want to authorize QuickBooks and Zapier to connect? And you don't even have to paste an API key or a username and password. But for this particular situation, we're looking at API key. And we try to be really helpful in the description as well. So you're not just on your own looking for some random string in your account. We try to link exactly where you need to go. So if I clicked on this link, the next direction there was to scroll down to the Zapier section. And there's a settings button. And then in here, it will give you your API key. Now, in order to actually view this API key, you'll have to generate it for the first time or you'll have to generate it again. But just keep in mind that every time you generate an API key for 17 hats, it will invalidate your other API key that you have connected. So I highly recommend once you generate that API key, just copy and paste it somewhere temporarily while you're setting up your Zap, so you don't run into a situation where you're generating and regenerating and things are becoming invalid. So we'll just pretend that I generated and copied that and entered it into here. And we'll hop back into the Zap. So we'll save and continue. And now what's going to happen is 17 Hats and Zapier were just talking to each other. And Zapier said, hey, 17 Hats, can you give us an example of just some recent context that you have there so we know what kind of data that we want to give back to the user to use in other steps? And 17 Hats says, absolutely. I have a couple of them for you here. So if we just click on this little down arrow, we can see, okay, who is contact A? So we'll scroll down. Oh, look, it's actually me. I created myself as a contact in 17 Hats prior to this, so we can have a nice demo here. So we'll just use contact A for the rest of the flow. So we'll continue. And now Zapier says, hey, hold on, you're not finished. Like, you have to have at least one action here for the Zap. So we'll just click this link. I'll say, which action would you like? So our next step in our process was to add a customer to QuickBooks. So we'll go ahead and select that, save and continue. And again, I've already connected my QuickBooks account to make this easy, but if you wanted to do it yourself, you just simply click on Connect Account. This little window would pop up. And again, this is one of those authentications that's super easy. I'm already logged into QuickBooks, so they're just asking me, hey, do you want to give Zapier access? You click yes, and it's done. It'll pop you right back to Zapier here. So we'll go ahead and we'll click on Save and Continue. Now, when we're setting up the customer, QuickBooks has many fields. You don't have to fill them all out, but you do have to fill out something that is required. And this isn't required by Zapier. This is actually required by QuickBooks. So we'll display all the information, but we play by the rules of all of the apps. So if you're ever like, Zapier, why are you doing this? It's not us, you know, it's QuickBooks. And this is what they need. This is what they require to create a contact. So instead of, some people type a name here, but if you wanted this to work dynamically, you don't want to type a name. You know, if you wanted every time a new contact is created in 17 Hats, if you wanted to take that name of the new contact each and every time, you'd want to click this button here. This is our Insert Fields button. So if you click that, you can actually say, oh, here's my name. So every time a new contact comes in, whether that changes to, you know, Joe Schmo or Cindy Smith or whoever, it's going to populate here. You don't have to worry about changing those things. And everything else is optional, but, you know, just for the sake of recording extra information, I think I also want to write the email address to QuickBooks as well. So I'll go down here and we'll click Continue. And it'll say, hey, do you want to test this out and actually send this to QuickBooks? And I can say, why, yes, I do. So it says, okay, we've sent this person to QuickBooks. So let's see if I'm still, of course I'm not logged in here. QuickBooks likes to log us out. So let's see if we can get back in quickly. All right. And then let's see. Let's refresh this, see if I can find myself.
I've got my fingers crossed you can find yourself, Jesse.
Oh, here I am. Jesse Parker, right there. So Zapier did go ahead and create that sample for me. So I can say, okay, all right, this step is working. So Zapier is also going to ask, hey, are you done? Or do you want to keep going? And when we had that process when we started, we had a bunch of other steps there. So let's keep going. So we'll add a step here. And I believe the next part of the process was to create a folder for the client in Google Drive. So we'll go ahead and create a folder. And I've already connected my account, but again, connecting your account, any you know, G Suite enabled app is going to make it super easy. It's just going to pop up this window, and they're going to ask you, hey, which G Suite, you know, app did you want to use and connect here? So you can just pick and then click yes to authorize. So we'll save and continue. And I know there are a lot of chats going on right now, which I'll check out after the presentation and make sure to answer all of your questions. So now we need to choose, okay, which Drive account is this? It's optional, but I just like to pick my Google Drive. Sometimes you're part of multiple teams and you might have other options here, but we'll just pick my Google Drive, and I've already created a folder in there called My Clients. So I'll select that. And then I want to name the folder after my client. But what I might want to do first is I might want to actually type in the word client with a colon and a space. And then I can go ahead and I can choose, okay, I want to go into the data from 17 hats. And I want to name the folder after my client. So I'll click continue there. And I'll send the test to Google Drive just to make sure that everything is working. And if I go here and oh, it already even added there before I could refresh the page. Man, that was quick. So let's see where we're at. Okay, so the next step that we wanted to do, let's add another one. We wanted to send an email because we're trying to find a time to coordinate an onboarding call with the client. So click send an email. I've already connected it. You've already gotten the gist of the authentication flow, so I'll skip that for now. And we'll decide, okay, who do we want to send this email to? Well, we want to send it to the client, of course. And all of this stuff we don't need to fill out except for the subject here. So we'll say schedule an onboarding call. And then we can say, hey, and we'll use their first name or their full name here. We can separate that out later. But hey, Jesse, let's find the time to chat. And this is where Calendly comes in. So I know I touched on that briefly before, and I said we might be able to use that to eliminate some steps in our process. So rather than going back and forth with the client, oh, does this work for you? Oh, yeah, that works for me. Oh, it doesn't work for me. And going back and forth and then having to manually enter it in the calendar. Let's just skip all that, right? Like we want to make our lives easier. So there's a service called Calendly, and it allows you to actually connect right to your Google Calendar, and it takes your schedule into account. And will only show time slots available for when you're available according to your Google Calendar. So let's just copy this URL so I can show you what it looks like. I've just set this up as a test. And now, when you send that to the client and they get that email, they'll be directed to this page. They say, oh, this time works for me. I see you have 2 time slots. They'll be able to fill this out. And then they'll be able to fill out a form. You can customize it however you'd like, and they'll be able to schedule an event that works with the both of you. So let's see here. I'll just paste that Calendly link and continue. And let's test this out to make sure it comes across. All right, schedule an onboarding call. Hey, Jesse Parker, let's find a time to chat. Click on the link. And it works just as expected. So we'll head back there.
Jesse, I have a question in the moment here.
Definitely.
And I missed that because I had something over top of that. When it created that Gmail, if you have a standard signature, did it use that standard signature? Or do you need to pop the signature in when you're creating email in Zapier?
So that's a really good question.
Yay!
So it will not, the current integration will not pull your email signature in when you send it. However, you can get around this 2 ways. One, if you didn't send the email right away, you could create a draft. And when it creates the draft in your Gmail account, Gmail will apply your signature before you send it.
Oh,
and
cool.
then the other way is to just change this plain to HTML. And then if you know HTML and you want to put a little HTML signature in here, that's another way that you can send your signature along with the emails automatically.
Okay, you could just do a copy and paste of your email signature too, right?
So the image wouldn't populate here if you had an image.
The image wouldn't, right? But if you just wanted like basic information, just
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
yeah, you could type whatever you want in here.
Yeah.
You can type in your phone number.
Cool. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
So
carry on, sir.
No, all good. I definitely welcome questions. So I think there was one more step in our process here, and that was to just add a subscriber to MailChimp. And so we'll just add update a subscriber. I've already connected my MailChimp account, but just to show you the third way that you might be asked for information, here's an example of an app that's using username and password. So however you signed into MailChimp, you just enter that same info here and log in. And then we'll save and continue. I've already got an audience set up for new customers newsletter. I'll simply, again, select the email from 17 Hats. We're good to go. Continue. I'm sure you all get the gist of testing now, so we can skip this part, but my test was successful, and then we'll finish it, and then I can name it. So I can name it, new onboarding flow. And I'll just turn my Zap on. And now there's really nothing I have to do with my onboarding process other than to create that initial client in 17 Hats. Zapier is going to take care of the rest for me. And if I could just pop back over here for a second, this is a comparison showing where we started, right? When we mapped out our flow chart and we put it on its side. And then these are all the steps we were able to automate with Zapier. And that big gap there, that's the time and energy that you're saving to use in other areas of your business. And this is where Zapier is really powerful. When you have your data organized, when you understand your process, and then you can just use Zapier to take care of those tasks, those admin tasks that you don't need to be doing. So I guess we can kind of bump it back to Kellie at this point. I'm not sure if we want to do a Q&A section. I know we have Heather on the call as well, and she's much more in tune with accounting workflows than I am. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think and answer some questions for you.
Okay, that sounds great. Awesome. You know what, Jesse, that was a great demo.
That was amazing.
And I love that you just didn't jump into Zapier and like, this is the greatest thing ever and yakety, 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 although lately I have been thinking it's one of the greatest things ever. But you did a really good, you know what? I super appreciate the whole lead in, and I'm all about processes and systems, and you did a great job of saying, yeah, you can just use Zapier, but plan it out a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. Even though I also believe in not overthinking.
Yes.
but just mapping out some of that stuff was great. And so I really appreciate you not just jumping in and saying, hey, here's Zapier, you have to use it. But you gave us a base of how to make it even more valuable for us. And I see Heather nodding. Don't you agree, Heather?
I absolutely agree. You know, it's funny because since I've started teaching Zapier and kind of evangelizing it in our community, I get a lot of emails and people reaching out to me saying, I want to learn Zapier. And my first question is, well, what is it that you're looking to automate? And I've had people say, oh, I don't know. I just know that I need to use it. And I said, well, right. That's not the way it works. You know, Zapier is a tool that you can use to, automate your workflows, but it's not something that you just implement like QuickBooks, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of people they don't realize that when they first hear about Zapier, they think it's something that they're going to connect everything to, and they don't understand the whole process of it.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you, Jesse. So there was a question back here, and thank you, Heather. I saw you answered the one on creating folders and subfolders. Mm-hmm. If you're a QBO and you're doing the bookkeeping and you build a Zap that includes QBO. So this is at 324 if it helps you find the question.
Yep, got it.
Yeah.
All right, you built a Zap. Can you connect it to your main QuickBooks Online Provisor account and have it work for each of your QuickBooks Online clients, or do you have to set it up for each individual client?
I see Heather nodding. I know Heather knows the answer to this because...
Yes, Heather, why don't you take this one?
Sure. So you can add as many QuickBooks Online companies to your Zapier account. So each one would need to be authenticated individually, and they would actually show up as separate accounts in your Zapier account. So as you're building out your Zaps, you would just select the one that you want to use in that particular Zap. So what I do, one thing that's really important is as you add these different accounts, it will name them, QuickBooks Company 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you definitely want to go in and rename them so that you know which client QuickBooks Company it actually is. So, and you do have the ability to do that. And you can do that with, a lot of the different accounts or the different apps that you're using. You can attach multiple multiple accounts to the same Zapier account.
Yeah, and let me give you a cautionary tale on that, Heather. That was what was going wrong with my Zap last week. So
that's exactly right.
Out on what should have been a simple Zap, and it was a Kellie fail. In that I was trying to all I was trying to do. So Heather asked a really great question in a group a little while ago. She said, what's the one Zap that would clean something up for you? What's the one thing? right? Because you don't just want to go zap happy and start creating these things willy-nilly for no reason. And I hate creating my client monthly folders. And I thought I can just set up a Zap for that. So I did that for all of my clients. And then Laura in one of the groups asked if then you'd be at your limit pretty quick of 20 Zaps in the base account. I'm like, why don't I create one long Zap to do this? Well, I kept pulling in the wrong Gmail account or the wrong Google Drive account. And so it wouldn't do what I wanted. So the first time I pulled in the right account and I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be simple. And then the next time, so if you're going to have them, just like Heather said, name them, because it's the simple things. It wasn't Zapier's fault. I knew it was a Kellie fail somehow. And Heather spotted it right away that the problem was in fact the account that I was using.
And that's also why it's super important to write out your processes first, just like Jesse showed, is you need to write out the processes, especially if you're working with lots of different clients' accounts. The worst thing that you could do is map it to the wrong client, right?
Yeah.
So you really do need to be very, diligent about, mapping out the process. I use a simple Google Sheet to do this. And, I put in exactly what, the app is, what the name of the account is, and what it is that I'm trying to do all the way through. So when I get in to actually build this app, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Sometimes I'll have Zapier open if I need to figure out if I have access to a field or if I actually have the, a trigger or an action available to me. But when I'm actually building the Zap that's going to run or I'm testing a Zap, I always have that mapped out ahead of time so that I don't accidentally, make an error. Or I think when I first started doing it, I was setting up a email response Zap. And I tested it, and it sent an email to an actual person.
Oh.
That, I hadn't done business with in a long time because it pulls up sample data. And so that was the first lesson that I learned with Zapier is always have a test environment when you're testing, when you're building your apps. Never, ever build a Zap with live data.
Such a great idea. So then I see a little further down the question on multiple QBO clients, and I'm just going to answer that real quick. QBO is a paid subscription no matter what. It's a higher level one. There's lots and lots of free apps that you can connect. QBO is not one of them. So that requires a higher level subscription. If you have a question, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself too. I'd love to hear how you're all feeling about that. Sabine, I'm looking into employee onboarding, need to make that process simpler.
Yeah, I have a client, they own a bakery and they have 25 employees, but it's a coming in and going at all times. Payroll is, when somebody new starts, we need the TD forms, we need the whatever form they have, we got banking information for direct deposit, and it's coming in bits and pieces and late and slow. And so I'm trying to build a SAP that, I get an email or whatever with just the new client or new hire. Yeah. And then from there, it would create different steps to finally send an email to the new employee.
Yeah. So I think, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, first of all, map out all of the puzzle pieces that need to go together in what order, obviously, just as everybody said. But that one would almost require a subject line that the bakery always uses, right, Heather, to start that whole process, I think?
I used new hire. That was in the subject, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's totally something that you can build out.
So, but my problem was it says new hire, but somehow I need to receive the new hire's email address. So do I just get that email with the email address and then take that and put it somewhere? That's where I was stuck right at the beginning.
I'd create my next step as a type form. Heather, what do you think? Or a Google form.
Yeah, so wait a minute. Can we go back to go back to the beginning? So the beginning is you need to send, I mean, the end result is that you want to send an email to a new hire to fill out your forms.
Correct.
Okay. So the first step in that process is they've been hired. and you're putting that employee information in somewhere, right? And when you're putting that employee information somewhere, you're probably going to add the email address. So what I would be looking for is, where are you actually putting that information in to record the fact that you've just hired that employee? And
sorry, the owner of the business would have to let me know we have a new hire. This is the email address.
So they're emailing you an email that says new hire, and they're giving you the name of the person. And are they also giving you the email of the new hire in that email?
Not currently, but that's my plan.
Actually,
so you could do that, and then you would be able to use theirs in the formatter. There's a place where you can go and extract. You could use the formatter tool, the built-in app in Zapier, to grab that email address.
Oh, okay, good.
And then that would be create a field, and then you'd be able to use that in your action sheet.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah. You're welcome. Or depending on the order of events, you could start with there's a templated email of some sort that the owner sends to the new employee, that they fill out the information, and that notifies you, that the form notifies you that there's a new hire and this is their information. And then you send out something else. So it could start either with the email, depending on what the owner wants to do. Really, we're trying to make lives easier for our clients.
Right.
Yep.
What would be the easiest for the owner? Do they have an email that's already composed that has a link to the form that you want them to fill out? And then when that form gets completed, or even started, because completing them seems to be an issue for restaurants, not that I've ever seen that, then maybe then the form notifies you that something's happened.
Yeah, that's
and then an email with a handbook.
I love that.
Yeah, an email with the handbook then goes out, and then a nagging email if things aren't followed through.
Mm-hmm.
So start your process with what's going to make it easiest for your client, and what's going to make your new hire more likely to do things too. And then you can zap the information from that form into the other things.
Perfect. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question? Did I miss it? Mm-hmm.
There were a couple here in the in the chat that I wanted to address, and I know that Heather, you answered this one. It was about can you indicate a path such as shared customers, bookkeeping, monthly clients? And Heather, you correctly answered that yes, you can create those folders and subfolders. But I just wanted to quickly show exactly how you access a folder path in here. It's actually super simple. So if you're looking at my screen, and let's say that you wanted to put something inside of that folder that you created, you would just keep clicking down into the folders until you got the exact path you needed. So just wanted to quickly show that in a visual sense so you understood what I was saying.
Right. And Jesse, could you show quickly how to do that subfolder that would actually look back at the parent folder you just created? Because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck.
I got stuck the first time on that, and then by accident I realized that it was just refreshing and finding the lower levels.
That was my question, actually. I'm the one who put that in there. I have a whole folder template that I use for a new client. Mm-hmm. And that template has multiple folders, and then within those folders it has other multiple folders. So I have that whole template that I drag in and give a name.
Gotcha. So you want to create a file in the folder that was just created? Am I understanding that right?
No, when I set up a new client, I have a whole folder tree for that client. So it has, ABC Inc. The first folder is client information, then it's government remittances, and then it's, workflow checklists, and there's a whole grouping of them. And then, within government remittances, it automatically creates an HST folder, a PST folder, whatever. So I have like this whole tree that I've created as a template that every time I have a new client, I have to bring it in and set it up with the new client's name.
So that would be a copy folder.
Getting to, pardon?
That would be a copy folder from Google Drive, right? You could just create and I'm not sure that I think you'd have to set it up this way. Like you could create the whole framework here and it would accomplish the same thing. trying to remember if.
Because I know we can't copy a whole.
Yeah, not the folder. You can copy a file.
Yeah.
You can make a copy of a file, but you can't make a copy of a folder. So you would have to set it up this way. But once you did it, once you set it up the first time, every time you added a new client, if whatever the trigger was, it would accomplish the same thing. Instead of dragging it over, it would just create all of the folders for you.
Okay. Thank you.
And Teresa, are you tired of me yet? How many meetings have we had in the last week?
I never, ever, ever, ever get tired of you, my dear.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
And Zapier, this is actually my very first, I keep seeing everybody online, Zapier, Zaps, and I know nothing. Other than I really need to automate some stuff, and I know exactly what I need to automate. I just have no idea how to do it. So. Okay,
cool. So now we have a couple of people asking about Paul Burns' question. Hey, Paul, how are you? And all those lovely boys of yours. And so Heather, maybe you can answer that. You did run through that in the course. You have some great zaps for day-to-day bookkeeping.
Let me see where's the question again? Sorry.
It's basically Paul and then a few other people want to know what day-to-day bookkeeping would you use Zapier for? What would save some steps?
So,
quick, I'm just going to jump in.
Yeah.
In a way, make sure that these are tasks that suck time out of your day. If something isn't happening efficiently, then see if there's a zap that you can make for it. And Heather, I know you've got a couple of great ones that I now use, so go ahead.
So I mean, as far as transactional zaps with QuickBooks, one of the ones that I have used is intercompany allocations. So basically you have two clients, they're interrelated companies, and an expense happens in one company and you need a revenue transaction to happen in another company. Or it could be that you have, a parent subsidiary situation where you have an expense that's coming in to into one company and you need that same expense to be recorded in a second or even a third company. Right. So that's one way that you can use Zapier. So the trigger would be new expense, and then the action would be a new expense, but in another QuickBooks file.
Right.
So you can use multiple QuickBooks company files or companies in the same Zap. So I could have one Zap that that is touching five different QuickBooks companies. Another Zap that I built, and it's a hack, and it's very simple. It's one of those Band-Aid situations that Jesse was talking about, but it does work and it does save time, is I created a commission calculator. So what it does is it accrues commission. So when you create an invoice in QuickBooks, it will actually calculate a simple commission calculation and then write back an expense transaction or a journal entry back to QuickBooks. So that is one way that you can automate that.
Wow. You know what's funny? Talk about coincidence. In a couple of Facebook groups, in the last couple of days, I've seen questions on commissions and how to calculate them.
Yeah, that one works. Although one of the ones that I did, which is super cool because it uses a liability account, isn't supposed to work in QuickBooks. And eventually I'm thinking that little gap will get closed. And I'm not a big fan of doing things to accounting software that you're not supposed to do. But the end result actually works beautifully, where we have an expense account that actually is coded to a liability account instead of a bank or credit card account. But that's broken. I mean, that's not something that should work, and it does.
Let me just qualify that. So instead of setting up like a paid by shareholders bank account, is that what you're talking about? You can keep.
So what I'm talking about is an invoice happens and I need to accrue commissions on it, right?
Oh, okay.
And what I could do is I could create an expense account, and then instead of mapping to a bank account for the source account, a bank account or a credit card account, I actually mapped to a liability account, which was the commissions account, right? Mm-hmm. And so when it sent the expense over, it actually credited that commissions payable liability account. And so when I look at the expense transaction, it actually has no account at the top because it's not supposed to work. And I don't recommend this, but I'm just saying that that's one of the things that when you're building Zaps, you need to be aware of, is that sometimes those types of things aren't locked down. And it may work, but you shouldn't do it, because at some point it's not going to work, because that's not the way that the integration was designed to function. And so while it was really cool that I created this, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, it looks exactly the way I want, I didn't actually use it, because I knew that eventually QuickBooks was going to fix that, or something was going to happen. I was going to have an undesired result. So it's really important to understand the guidelines of, how the programs work. And even when you find those little workarounds, they're really cool. And man, I was stoked. I'm like, this is really cool, because it's going to the liability account. I want to do that. But I was like, this is not a best practice.
Okay.
So,
I got you.
So you could do a journal entry. You could also use, a bank account to do it, or create a dummy credit card account and would do the same thing. Another thing that is not transactional but is really cool, one of the Zaps that I teach in my course, is W-9 collection, which I know in Canada, and I think most of you, if not all of you, are Canadian, but we have to collect W-9s in the US from our vendors so that we can send them 1099s at year end. And so one Zap that I use for myself and for any clients that I need to collect W-9s is, when you create a vendor in QuickBooks, there's a checkbox that the vendor is subject to 1099 reporting. And so I have a Zap that if I create a new vendor and I check that box, it fires off an email with a blank W-9 attached that it actually grabs from the IRS website. And it gives them a link to a share file folder so they can securely upload that completed W-9. And so that has really streamlined me chasing W-9s.
Right.
My vendors. And the first point where I was actually setting it up is usually I was putting that vendor into QuickBooks so that I could start doing business with them. So that made sense for my workflow.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. And Sabine, in a way, the questionnaire that you have for onboarding employees, you could probably in the Google form have some sort of notification that they can do something similar with what's RT4s.
Yeah.
To what you just described, almost the exact same thing could happen within that Google form.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, we can see how those possibilities of not sending stuff around and finding the links could work.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question for Heather. Circling back to the commissions calculator.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you said that there was a way that you figured out a workaround, but is there a commissions calculator you use in QuickBooks?
Is there like an app commissions calculator?
No. The Zap, you said you created a Zap for
Yes.
commissions calculator. When you create an invoice, then it will create
Yes.
an expense. So you do have that working, or is that, or
it does work. Yeah, it does.
Or is that referring still to how you linked it to an expense account, which was really a liability account?
So the Zap that I use,
I'm just trying to basically get to see if this is possible the right way. Then I can just, even if it's an expense account and I create a dummy account for it to be linked to for the credit card account or whatever.
Yeah, you could totally use it. If it does work, what you would need, it's simple commissions. I mean, you could technically build out a complicated commission structure using the formatter tool and probably some other apps. The one that I have is very simple. So it's basically, if it looks to see the salesperson's code, right? So it uses what's called a lookup table in Zapier. And it looks for the salesperson's code that I have set up in QuickBooks Online.
Mm-hmm.
And when it finds it, it looks for a value. So 5%, 10%, whatever it is. When it finds that code, it uses that value. And then I have a calculation step that takes the total of the invoice and multiplies it times that value from the lookup step. And then what it does is it takes the result of that calculation, right?
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt right now. Somebody has a lot of background noise.
Oh, sorry. I'll mute. It's me. I'm at Starbucks, so I'm the one who asked the question, but I'll mute it. They're making all their coffee.
Okay, and then we'll let Heather keep going with the answer.
Right.
Sounds good.
So then it calculates the commission, and then what you can do is you can do a journal entry. So if you want to do a journal entry and hit that liability account, you could absolutely do that, right? So I've done it that way, or you could use a credit card account, you could use a bank account, and it would just be on your balance sheet. It would look wrong, but it would work the same way. So so you could do that. I prefer the journal entry method myself.
Yeah, we do journal entry
Yeah.
typically. So I just thought about that for.
And what you would do is you would map the result from that calculation to the amount lines in the journal entry, and you would just debit commission expense, credit commission liability.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. I see a couple of questions in there on the daily sales receipts, because as we know, those are time sucks. And so I am trying to see what, and I don't necessarily want that daily sales from a Google sheet or an Excel sheet, because then the client still has to do the work. So what I've done, and I'm just going to give you a quick note on how Kellie has educated her clients. I've taught them to use sales receipts in QuickBooks Online, and I can only speak to QuickBooks Online now. I've actually taught them to do that because it's faster and more effective for them to do that right in the program than to do it into an Excel sheet and then to transfer the information. Whoever's doing that, I've taken that step out, and just what I've done is I've created a recurring transaction so that my clients, either their admins or whoever, just has to fill it out. So okay, and I see that, Coral. Absolutely, not everybody should be allowed into QBO. And we did, the restaurants that I have, we did circle around on how to allow some access on that. But yeah. What I would like to know is what I'm going to look at is the POS systems that my clients have, and how those are, if they are Zapier enabled, to be able to send that information directly into QuickBooks. It's on my things I need to check out list. And so, sorry, Heather, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say that I had helped somebody set up a Google form that they were having somebody fill out, that has a Google sheet behind it that actually zapped that sales receipt information over. And that way it was just easy for the person to take the numbers from their Z-tape and enter them into the Google form.
Wow, you know what? I love that, because Google Form is way more friendly for the average person than a Google Sheet.
Right.
Yay for the win. I love that. So if I get a restaurant that isn't going to do that, I'm totally going to use that. Okay, carry on.
Heather, you said the Google Form backed by a Google Sheet.
When you create a Google form, you have the option to create a Google Sheet that's associated with that form. And what happens is every time somebody completes the form and submits it, the data from each field in the Google form is written to a new line in the Google Sheet.
Oh, okay.
So the way that Zapier works is there's a trigger that you have, and it says Google form, but really what it's doing is it's looking at a new line in the Google Sheet behind the Google form. And then what it will do is it'll take the values from that entry, and then you can zap them wherever you need them to go.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
So Jesse, there's a good question from Carmen. Carmen's getting it from a spreadsheet, but not a Google Sheet. Carmen, can you either, and hi Carmen, can you either let us know what that spreadsheet is? I mean, you can do that from Outlook too, can't you? So, or whatever you call it. Excel, that thing called Excel. You can do that same Zap, right?
It's a very complicated form that they created to record the daily sales from 3 stores.
Right.
And they have 3 tills. So the POS system that they have, it doesn't integrate with QBO. So it takes us, just to give you an idea, about 7 minutes post the daily sales on QuickBooks. So
every day.
Yes, so every day. So and it's 3 stores. So it's like 10, 12 hours a month that we need to make sure that everything balances. And so I'm trying to use a SAP. And I asked them to see if they could do a Google Sheet, and they say that they might, but because it has lots of formulas and everything balances at the end with the cost of goods sold and everything, it's a little bit complicated spreadsheet that they do have. But if they can, so I'm going to ask them to see if they can do a Google form then.
Yeah, I love the Google form idea, Heather. That is just such a better way to do it than an Excel sheet for a lot of these restaurants. Way better. Okay. This selects the class. It enters the sales. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I can't believe it. We're at 4:00. Does anybody? Does anybody have some other questions? We got like almost no time left. No?
Well, I'll do a shameless plug for my Zapier workshop.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a Zapier workshop that's starting on Friday, and it runs for 5 weeks. So we do 5 one-hour sessions together live. I do record them and post them to Slack, and then we do 30 minutes of Q&A and workshopping together after the instructional part of it. So if anybody's interested in that, I'll put the link in the chat. And I have a discount code if anybody wanted to sign up for that.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug for Heather's plug. I took Heather's course, and not only did it get me rolling in, and I already mentioned this, did it get me rolling a little bit more in Zapier, it gave me the insight as to how we can use this for our clients as well. And Heather throws so many other aha moments into her stuff. I wandered off with a few other great ideas, totally unrelated to Zapier, just like the moment we just had a few minutes ago using the Google form rather than a spreadsheet for clients to do their daily sales in. So it's those kind of moments that were fantastic too. So yeah, thank you, Heather. And I know there's a lot of other APIAs that have taken Heather's course, accounting professionals I admire, that have taken Heather's course and walked away with lots of valuable information. Anybody else? We got 2 minutes. If somebody wants to ask a question, well, you've got Jesse and Heather. Okay.
I can say something quick.
Yeah.
I'll do a minor plug and get on the plug bandwagon here.
Sure.
So just to let everybody know, Zapier is working on our own like big global user community. So we hope to have a section in there definitely for accounting professionals as well, if you're looking for help with Zapier and accounting related things. So that's not going to come out until the end of the summer, but what I am going to do, I'm going to give a beta sign up form. I'm going to post that in the channel, in Kellie's channel, and then anybody who wants to sign up, we'll get you in the community early, so you don't have to wait until the end of the summer to start asking questions and things like that.
Okay, that's great. Actually, I'm going to address a question that somebody sent to, or a really important note that somebody sent to me privately, and thank you. Somebody sent me a note saying that their client uses Shogo to hook Touch Bistro to QBO. 100% agreed. I'm going to tell you what happened to me on the weekend when I got way too nose down building a few Zaps. I went to build a Zap so that Eventbrite could send something to MailChimp. Well, Eventbrite already sends something to MailChimp. So I don't mean to be anti-Zap here, but also sometimes there's native integrations that you could take a look at, and then the Zap can build out the integration from there. So I just wanted to mention that. That was a really like dorky Kellie moment that I went, really? That's what you're going to do when you have so many other Zaps that would add value? You're going to build one that's native? So when you're doing the mapping, like Jesse pointed out to us, it's really important to double check what those native integrations look like as well. And some of the native integrations are great. Like I will say, some of the programs that say they send their invoices from a program over to QBO, well, it doesn't map them properly, and then you're spending way too much time reorganizing your items and your HST in our world. But so even if there is a native integration, find out if it works well, go ahead. But if it doesn't work well, then that's where Zapier can come in as well. And
I would also say that a lot, apps are constantly updating or making updates to their own software. So I've had plenty of apps that I retired when the integration that I was looking for between another app rolled out. And when I tested it, it was good. So an example of that was in my class I used to teach SMS. What is it called? SMS. Gosh, I can't remember the name of the app now. It's like eluding my brain. But what the Zap did is it scheduled text messages. It automated text messages to your clients, and then that app actually came out with that functionality natively. And so it's important to watch the notifications that are coming from the apps that you're using to see when they're adding new features, because when you do have a native integration, those tend to be really stable, right? Because they're built directly into the apps. And with Zapier, awesome program, and I love it. One of my favorite, next to QBO, it's one of my favorite apps. But it's also, it does take a little bit of maintenance. Somebody changes their API, a Zap can break, and you have to constantly be maintaining it and making sure that you have that integrity of data that Jesse was talking about. So if there is a maintenance, related to using Zapier.
Yeah. And just food for thought at the end of it all. And I know we're over time here, so I'm going to wrap it up shortly, but really, if anybody wanted to leave, you just could. Except for us. I often have this internal conversation with myself, which I'm sure sometimes the words are actually coming out of my mouth, even though I'm in the room alone. I wonder where it's all going to go. I'm not sure if I was like an app, how much integration I'd be building out anymore with Zapier able to do so much of it. It's a question I ask myself a lot. Well, not a lot, but more often than I should. I should go find other things to think about other than technology, but that's a whole other conversation. It is an interesting thing to see where this is all going. And I know not everybody loves tech and not everybody loves the cloud tech, but man, it's kind of more exciting than it is scary, especially since I'm not an app developer. But it is so cool to wonder where this is all going to go next, because man, it moves along so fast too, right? So fast. Yeah. Anyways, that's my two cents on where it's all going. Is I have no idea. So Heather, thank you so much. As always, you bring great insight. Jesse, thank you so much for doing a great presentation for us. You really gave me some food for thought at the beginning of it, and I was glad to see, again, I'm going to just reiterate that you didn't just jump in and Zapier is the greatest and just go ahead and build some Zaps, and here's how you do it. That was a great way to preface it. And I want to thank everybody who joined in the Zoom today. I know there are a ton of webinars around right now, so I appreciate you taking the time to join us on this one today. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kelly, for inviting me. And thank you, Heather, for being here and being an awesome expert of ours.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly. And thanks, Jesse. It's been really fun.
Okay. Thanks, guys. And have a great rest of the day.